so you can share with colleagues who might be interested. All right, so thank you all for joining. We're really excited to talk about round 2 of our Get Solar Communities program. I'm going to run through a little bit about the PA Solar Center first, and we'll get into the program specifics, and then there will be an opportunity for everybody to ask questions, and we'll have a little bit of a conversation. I'm Leo Kowalski. I'm the Director of Programming with the PA Solar Center. I've been with the organization for a little over 3 years now. We have on our call today Sharon Pillar, the founder and director, brought this really wonderful organization together and was the progenitor of the Get Solar program when it was a small cohort of just 11 projects. Now it's grown quite a bit since then. Recently, we've added Matt Mahoney, Director of Government Affairs. Sharon and Matt work on policy and education to ensure that we have opportunities in the state to catch up with some of our neighbors who are accelerating past us in renewable legislation and renewable policy at the state level. And we're falling a little bit behind. And so they're doing pretty amazing work in that space to try to educate legislators and educate decision makers, as well as make available some resources that can help municipalities and communities expedite the process of permitting solar and providing resources like land leasing handbooks for landowners who might be approached by solar developers for installations on their land. We have Gretchen Dugalecki, our communications consultant specialist. She's really wonderful, does really wonderful work ensuring that we're communicating all the work we're doing, engaging with legislators, and making sure that folks are aware that of the solar policy changes at both the state and federal level as they come through. All right, sorry, my slides no moving. All right, so our vision and mission, we talked a lot about this, and we're constantly revisiting and exploring, what these words mean. But our vision is that Pennsylvania becomes a leader in renewable energy through rapid and broad expansion and on in-state solar generation. And we want to provide trusted guidance to usher all Pennsylvanians into a clean energy economy in order to create more resilient communities. Now, as I mentioned earlier, falling a little bit behind some of our neighbors, but it is an opportunity to really imagine what a solar future in Pennsylvania could be. And when we say all Pennsylvanians, we really deliberated a lot on what that actually means tangibly. And so for us, it sort of looks like this, right? We want to diversify our energy mix with 10% solar goal by 2030. As many of you know on the call, we're half a percentage point is our current goal, which we've, I guess, rocketed past recently. So that's a pretty ambitious goal for the state, and it's a pretty insufficient goal relative to our neighbors and relative to the need to get renewable energy into our energy mix. We want to decarbonize power sector, providing market-ready renewables, preserving family farms with solar leasing. This is an enormously important topic right now. We lose a lot of family farms, hundreds of family farms annually to land use that's not beneficial to those owners. They're low density housing developments. Some of it's just farm consolidation for larger corporate entities. So it's not beneficial to these small family farmers in the way that solar can be an economic resource. It also doesn't impact the land's ability to be used for agriculture in the future. So it's a really nice opportunity for folks to preserve that land that maybe isn't as economically viable in its current state, but that family can maintain it and explore future opportunities. It's also compatible with a lot of agricultural systems, animal grazing, honey production. There's a lot of ways that that's being explored to integrate solar mixed land use with agricultural products. You want to expand the commercial sector solar, especially nonprofit, schools, local government, that MUSH sector. There's a really huge opportunity to get solar onto these facilities or into these land uses that can really impact the economics of those organizations, but also it's just a unique opportunity for solar to go into those spaces and change some of the energy profiles in those facilities. We can do this by creating a diverse, inclusive workforce. So solar is a really wonderful industry because there's a low barrier entry from a technical perspective for almost the entire vertical wedge. There's not a lot of solar jobs that are super highly specialized. I mean, you do have some electrician work, you have some engineering pieces, but a lot of solar installation, a lot of solar development can be accessible to people who straight out of high school. That's really exciting. It's a really great way for us to transition our energy from those previous workforce experiences like coal mining, which is where my family comes from. My father, my grandparents, uncles, really painful, exhausting work. But it was an opportunity for those folks to go right out of high school and some without high school educations. And so we can do that, which opens up the opportunities to include a greater diverse population into the spaces that maybe don't have the same access to education or resources that other energy systems require. All right. So how do we do all of this? Well, right now it's basically the three legs of the stool, as we like to phrase it. That's policy, education, advocacy. We spoke a little bit about that. That's getting robust solar policies to encourage the development of solar, the industry of solar in the state. Outreach, public awareness, providing resources on our website, providing resources through our webinar series that Sharon and Matt put together so that we can kind of create a greater understanding of solar generally. I mean, if you interact with a lot of folks in various levels of government or nonprofits, businesses, you'll find that solar awareness is not as developed as maybe we'd want. You know, we have a lot of really basic questions about how solar works and whether or not solar is viable in the state, which it is. And so, you know, we try to get that information in people's hands, and then, you know, more selective resources like permitting and zoning questions, try to answer that on our website increasingly. And then walking the walk, which is what we're going to speak about today, providing technical assistance to the commercial sector, businesses, nonprofits, municipal organizations. How do we help folks navigate what can be sometimes a cumbersome process to explore solar that consumes some time and resources? We can do that on their behalf and help them navigate that much more smoothly. So far, walking and walk for us has meant bringing in 31 organizations into the Get Solar program, which I'll describe shortly, representing about 7 megawatts of potential solar energy. So far, this is over the course of the last 3 years. Our program really, we launched round 2 of the program when I joined March of 2020, which many of you might recall was a difficult time for everyone everywhere. And it was a challenging time to try to engage people to spend money, go solar, explore this process. But we did have organizations join us that year, and we've had successful projects come out of that. We have 6 projects that have been contracted, and solar's either been installed and up and running, or it's in the process of being installed or still in that permitting phase. That's 27% completion rate, which is pretty strong. And a lot of the projects that we bring in have very difficult pathways to solar. They're going to be a long tooth process. It's going to take several years. You know, we welcome that experience. We help nonprofits specifically engage what can be a very arduous path to making the financing work. And particularly for smaller organizations, it's not very clear sometimes how to do that. And we try to help them navigate that. That represents $3.2 million of investment, which will have a cascading effect on the savings and the ability for those organizations to spend money. So that's a huge, huge opportunity we created and work with organizations to create. Recently, we hit the ground running in the fall for this program, the pilot program, the Get Solar Communities. Round 1 was with 2 communities, Meadville, Pennsylvania, a rural, urban rural for relative to Pennsylvania. It's an urban area in a very, very rural space. The Triborough Eco District, which is Etna, Millville, and Sharpsburg, right outside the city of Pittsburgh. It's actually where I live. And within those 2 communities, we were able to identify 21 viable solar projects that we're in the process right now of reviewing these solar proposals from developers. It has the potential to be 5.2 megawatts of solar installed. potentially more too. I mean, we're looking at 2 large nonprofit stakeholders that provide essential services to their communities, and we want to get too into the weeds with the technical pieces of this, but there's opportunities for each of those organizations to work with private investors, work with solar developers to create 5 megawatt systems individually. So, we're saying 5.2 megawatts. It could be more, certainly could be less, but the significant change in the solar profile of these 2 communities, specifically Meadville, which has really very little, almost no commercial solar installed right now. And we're talking about a tectonic shift in what's available or what's being produced solar wise, which will have cascading effects on those spaces. I mentioned earlier, 31 projects brought in the previous 2.5 years, 21 projects just through this program. So we're really excited to talk about how we're going to expand that moving forward as part of this discussion with Get Solar Round 2, or Get Solar Communities Round 2. The Get Solar process is basically, we conduct outreach to attract a cohort of organizations. Businesses, nonprofits have been primarily what we looked at, but we work with municipal organizations. We currently don't do much work with residential customers because it's an incredibly large opportunity to take a chunk of. There's not a lot you can do in terms of financing that's not very straightforward for residents, and there are other organizations that are doing a really good job of engaging communities at that level. So we're really trying to fill the niche that's not there. We gather those folks, we provide high level assessment of their solar potential and identify whether or not they have a meaningful path forward. And the folks that do, we bring into a request for proposals, an RFP document, and we send out to regional solar developers and have them provide complete treatment, solar proposal, financing, whatever can be put together. If it's a nonprofit, we request power purchase agreements and whatever those organizations can bring to the table, given the type of host site that we're working with. And then we help each of those organizations understand what we're reviewing with their proposals, providing this data in an apples to apples fashion. So we make sure that all the high level numbers, the costs, the savings, all of those things are using the same assumptions and provided in a way that's very easy to read. We're an unbiased resource. We're a nonprofit, so our largely foundation funded, though we do have support from businesses and other organizations. Our goal is to facilitate this decision making, but we're not engaged in a decision tree for these organizations. A couple of our success stories. Our very first project that we completed, Global Links. Global Links is a nonprofit that does really incredible work procuring medical supplies, and that includes like office furniture, things that you wouldn't really think are essential, but if you have a hospital somewhere in a developing nation, they have a certain budget, a limited budget. Are they going to buy chairs and desks with that money, or are they going to immediately direct it to service and medicine supplies? So they bring all these aggregate resources together that would be going into the waste stream otherwise here in the States, and they distribute it to communities locally, but also developing communities throughout the world. So really amazing organization. They had a section of the roof that needs some significant repair, and we're exploring solar as a way to kind of combine those 2 things, which we were able to help them find through a generous grant by the Green Mountain Energy Sun Club and a really clever design provided by Scala Solar to incorporate all of that work, the roof and the solar, into a price point that was actually less than just the solar was originally by itself. And then the support from the Sun Club was able to provide that funding. So Global Links was able to do this without any out-of-pocket expenses. Community College of Allegheny County engaged in a long-term power purchase agreement, which I'll talk about momentarily, but they spent no money down on a solar installation over 500 kilowatts. They're expected to save minimum $750,000 over the life of the system. But given the way the energy prices can change, and we've seen very recently that surplus could increase. But again, no money down. They have the opportunity to do this in a way that they are not responsible for the maintenance. They're not really responsible for ensuring the system's productive. That's another organization, a solar developer in their private investment. So this was a really great deal for CCAC because they obviously don't want to spend their time, energy, and resources managing such a large system if they don't have to and can still receive a financial benefit. Western PA Conservancy installed a 140 kilowatt ground mount that we were able to provide technical support. And our first small business owner, the G.E.T Property Ownership Group, Wexford, they rent this building out to the Zybart Automotive Resources Organization. So it was really neat. They're splitting the energy reduction with their renter and with an apartment building that they have for one of the property owners. All right, and so the vehicles that we explore to create the financing that helps these organizations complete their solar projects breaks down in a couple pieces. We'll talk about tax benefits first, and I'm going to hand it over to Sharon momentarily to talk a little bit about what is expected to come through the Inflation Reduction Act. There's still a lot to unpack, but as we move through this process, we'll have more information. It seems to be extremely positive right now, but tax benefits are the main vehicle for financing solar right now at any level. Even for nonprofits, we use clever resources to get these tax benefits to them, and perhaps we won't have to do some of that work anymore to make it happen. It'll just flow out nicely from the legislation. But the solar investment tax credit, which will now be 30% back to where it was originally, this is just dollar to dollar, 30% off first year's taxes after the installation's been installed. And then modified acceleration cost recovery system makers, it's just it's a full depreciation of the system in the first year. So again, that first year organization does their taxes, they can depreciate that solar asset like they would any other asset, and they can do the complete depreciation in that first year. So it's a significant cost savings. We say roughly 20% if the organization has the tax appetite. So between those two things, we're talking about half the solar cost recovered in the first year, which is tremendous. But I'll hand it over to Sharon to talk a little bit more about the Inflation Reduction Act.
Great, thanks a lot, Leo. Yes, as most of you have heard, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed by the Senate, the US Senate, over the weekend, and is expected to pass the House on Friday. This is a major piece of legislation that has direct and extremely positive benefits for anyone who's going solar and for the solar industry itself. So as Leo mentioned, these particular tax credits obviously available for those entities available to take that have a tax appetite. But in addition to the 30% tax credit, which has now been extended for 10 years, there are other benefits and additive to the investment tax credit. And we're still trying to unpack all of this. It's a very complicated piece of legislation, of course, isn't quite passed yet. And there's a lot of things that have to happen as far as the IRS and the Department of Energy actually issuing guidance and all of this. But sort of just a couple of the other additional things that we would see or expecting to see, that there are bonus tax credits for projects that have domestic content. So they're made with US manufactured components, and that ramps up, those percentages ramp up every year. So the higher percentage of those made in the USA components, the higher the tax credit, but that can go up to about 10%. And these are projects that are under 1 megawatt, which most of the projects that you would be interacting with probably will be under 1 megawatt. And there are some bigger entities that Leo's working with, as he mentioned, that might be above that too. But there are other benefits for them as well. So there's another 10%, as I mentioned, for the domestic content, another bonus tax credit of 10% for projects that are located in communities that it's not written in the legislation, but we'd call transition communities or communities that have energy infrastructure that has been closed, such as mines, coal mines, and coal power plants that have been closed. There are also additional bonus tax credits of 10% for low-income communities, and also for projects that are qualified low-income residential building projects or qualified low-income economic benefit projects. So all of that to be defined, and lots of different things. So some of these projects can get up to, in addition to this 30% tax credit, could get up to 50 or 60%, depending on where they're located and the components that are used. So a lot of different nuances will be looking at, and I think more than ever, this is a great time to be coming into the Get Solar program to have help and guidance with these type of things. And then for the tax exempt entities, such as nonprofits, municipalities, and others, there are some opportunities instead of the tax credit, which they can't take, to have a direct pay sort of in lieu of these tax credits. So we're still trying to unpack that, where that's appropriate and how that would work. But that's another great benefit because, as Leo's mentioned, we are working, a lot of these projects that are tax exempt are working with third-party investors to offer a power purchase agreement. There might be some additional opportunities to not have to work with them, or additional benefits that working with them even brings that cost down more than ever. So it's made sense. Solar has made sense to go financially for a long time, and now it's going to be really a no-brainer. If people aren't going solar, they're just really missing out. And there's a whole slew of other benefits that I won't go into with the Inflation Reduction Acts, and also with energy efficiency and energy storage as well. So I'll just stop there and turn it back over to Leo. Thanks.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, and as we learn more and unpack more, we'll be providing resources, webinars, informational sessions. We'll explore this thoroughly, obviously, but it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get our head around it. Even when it's fully passed, there'll still be a lot of questions, and as Sharon mentioned, some time to implement it. But it's a really exciting time to explore solar, especially to scale these larger scale projects. The financing now looks incredibly good, and it's been strong for a while, which is one of the reasons we do this program, is that there's really strong solar finance that people aren't aware of. But now it could be very, very easy to make solar make sense financially. Yeah, so in addition to tax benefits, loans are a very common way to extend out the upfront cost of solar, to make sure that savings that you're provided by the solar installation is actually maybe generating money in year one. So we do occasionally work with businesses. We have a project that is completed that still a lot of details to be worked through, but they look to be cash positive as early as year 3, possibly year 1 if some other financial mechanisms fall through. But just from the tax benefits and their a loan that they're exploring with their regional bank, because they have a strong cash flow, they might be generating money in year 3 and then quite a bit of money in the next following years. So it really does change the way you kind of view solar as being a little bit of a long-term return, or a longer-term return, several years for a business. But if you have a manufacturer or any type of organization that has a large flat roof, that's scaling that solar up size-wise, and then of course increasing energy prices starts to make the cost savings and that profile look really strong early on. And so the loan's a way to kind of stretch out to defray that upfront cost, which is somewhat obvious, but it's worth mentioning that it's a pretty common thing to explore. And a lot of banks, regional banks, have the sophistication to explore solar. However, there are organizations that maybe don't have as much experience, and there are support mechanisms like the USDA has their Rural Energy for America program that has a loan backing component to it that can help regional banks in rural areas understand how solar finance works and give them some guarantees that will allow the host organization a little bit more latitude and a little stronger financing. Another vehicle, we've talked about this a few times, power purchase agreements. I mean, this has been the primary way for nonprofit organizations or municipal organizations to explore solar. There's something called a virtual power purchase agreement, which we probably won't talk about a lot here, but ultimately what this means is there's a 3-party agreement between the solar developer, a tax equity investor that's providing the financing, the upfront cost. They're actually going to be the on-paper owner of that system for several years to meet IRS obligations. And the organization that's exploring solar, the host site, we would call it. And this relationship allows, under the current dynamic where a nonprofit can't assume any of those tax benefits, it allows that third party to be the on-paper owner. They can claim all those tax benefits, and then they can provide some of that savings from the tax benefits to the host site through this arrangement. Now they have to maintain ownership for at least 5 full tax years so that the IRS doesn't claw back any of those benefits. But then after that, there's one of two things happens. Either as part of the structure of this agreement, they maintain ownership for a long period of time. The host site is never really the owner of the solar system, but they receive some financial benefit in terms of cost savings on their electricity, or that ownership gets turned over to the host site either through a buyout payment in that moment, or occasionally they prepay at the beginning. So they spend cash as if they were buying the solar system as a prepayment for a leasing arrangement over 5 years. It can sound a little complicated. It really isn't, especially for the host site. It can be a pretty straightforward process. A lot of the engineering for these things is done with the solar developer and the tax equity investor, and then they provide the platform. They provide the sort of contract and all that stuff for the host site to review, but it can be pretty painless. It was CCAC. I'm sure things happen between lawyers that can make it, you're going to have your lawyers review and they're going to piece these things out and look for concerns, but generally speaking, these are very easy to get through. Mentioned the long-term power purchase agreement. This is we're kind of zeroing in on this form of the power purchase agreement on this call because it seems to be something that's going to stay somewhat relatively unchanged in the way that it's going to work, or the benefits for approaching this kind of arrangement despite the Inflation Reduction Act. But it's really great for municipalities, school districts, for large nonprofit organizations that, like CCAC, as we mentioned earlier, not necessarily interested in owning the system and owning the maintenance and other aspects of the system that one organization that has a lot of the resources invested in to their immediate goals and their immediate structure that just might be a little bit cumbersome, or also doesn't really want to spend upfront cash. These are really great arrangements because typically they're completely cash neutral at the beginning for organizations. Sometimes their immediate savings, as with CCAC, to providing an immediate benefit to them financially, and they've spent no money. They've just been basically providing their roof as a space for somebody else to lease and put the system up. And that's available for organizations with a fair amount of roof space or a fair amount of ground availability. CCAC is 500 kilowatts. That's hard to put in terms that's really easy to understand off the top of your head. But I mean, you imagine one campus for a community college, a large flat roof, that's what you get. But we're in Mevo, rural areas like that, we're exploring huge, like multi-megawatt systems on ground mounts, that the use case for it immediately is maybe there were buildings on it that are demolished. Maybe it's a ground that's been sited already for development, prepared for development that isn't going to go through anymore. We certainly don't encourage organizations and are not interested in ground clearing and things that would impact environmental ecosystems negatively. But there's a lot of space. There's an enormous amount of space out there that has immediately no it's not forested, it's not a wetland, that has no commercial availability for it, that could be used for a large-scale solar system that generates income for an organization over 25, 30 years. And then those systems could be moved and other development can be put in there later. But again, it's a really great opportunity financially for organizations that have space. Another thing that we've developed internally, working with Bridgeway Capital and Heinz Foundation, Heinz Endowment, is Clean Power Partner Fund is what we call it. It's a revolving loan fund. Heinz provided $1 million to develop this fund specifically for lending to nonprofits that need to close their gap financing after grants or the discount from a power purchase agreement. Now, I guess just immediate benefits from the ITC. There's still going to be some financing left to do. This will provide low interest, flexible term loans for nonprofits specifically. There's no immediately geographical boundary for this, so we're looking Western Pennsylvania ideally. Hopefully, increasingly there will be more funds provided for this. The loan program will catch on, and we can keep increasing that radius. So we're looking to identify between 6 and 8 organizations. We have obviously a list of organizations right now that are pursuing solar that are close to this decision, and this gap funding will help a lot. But we're going to grow the program ideally and find more funding. It's a really exciting opportunity to help nonprofits finance solar in a way that is flexible and can work with their specific limitations. All right, so that gets us to the meat of it, which is Get Solar Communities Round 2, what you're all here to talk about or learn a little bit more about. As I mentioned earlier, we did our pilot round from fall 2021, fall 2021 to now we're still working on projects, but we've tried to adjust our calendar so that we're procuring or we're doing the outreach phase earlier or I should say later in this year, so that next year we can be prepared with those solar ready organizations right at the time when a lot of funding is available in terms of grants and various government programs, and that solar developers are not swamped trying to complete projects, in the hot times of spring and summer. So we're going to point out this deadline repeatedly. Friday, September 2nd is when the applications are due from community organizations, community leadership groups, municipalities to be participants in the Get Solar Communities program. And obviously there's several weeks between now and then, but it can go very quickly. So if anyone that's on the call or anyone that's affiliated with any groups that is interested in learning more after this webinar or engaging on a deeper level, talk about this, I really encourage everybody to reach out to me and set up time to talk. I'm happy to speak with anyone at any time about this program in advance of the deadline. I really wouldn't want anybody to miss it because they didn't have the opportunity to ask questions or explore it a little further. And we will provide, our website has the request for applications, and we'll provide that to folks on the call as well through email, document detailing a little bit more of the stuff that we're not going to cover here. But it's a really simple application. I mean, we're really just interested in learning more about your community, about the people participating, what their capabilities are as volunteers to do this work. Our objectives for the program assist up to 5 communities identifying solar feasibility of municipal, commercial, and nonprofit properties. We worked with the last round in 21 projects, which is really exciting and represented an enormous chunk of the Get Solar work that we've already done. So upping it to 5 is a pretty significant ask, but we're excited to take that on. And part of what it is, the design of this program is to put the first phase of this, the outreach phase, into the hands of the communities and really let you do the work of exploring your networks and building the relationships and identifying those organizations that are solar ready. And then we will come in and provide that technical support to get them over the finish line. We want to demonstrate that our trusted resources, streamlined technical assistance, and pre-identified financing that we've discussed already can help decrease the solar decision-making time and increase confidence for organizations to go through with it, that they know that what they're looking at is real and tangible, and that they have solar experts helping them unpack what proposals they're receiving and what that financing can look like and what their benefits are. And really increasing regional economic development. And this is super important. The solar industry has a really huge opportunity to grow in Pennsylvania and all across the state, but also like the local impact on the economy can be really tremendous. I mean, you're talking about organizations providing essential services, saving money immediately, especially if they have no upfront costs. In some instances, that really changes what they can do with the money that they have, and it provides stability. Electricity, you certainly can't predict where electricity prices are going to go, but I would be shocked if they ever go down over the next couple of decades. And I would be a lot less surprised if they don't go way up. And assuming we don't do large-scale adoption of renewable energy and huge public works investments, which don't seem likely either, energy is a huge pain point for a lot of organizations. So to create a structure that levelizes that over decades, solar modules are warranted for 25, 30 years, and they have a lot of life after that. These installations can last quite a long time. Have some security in your financing through your electricity usage is really exciting. And our specific tangible goals for each of these communities identify 10 non-residential solar sites with hopefully a cumulative capacity of at least 1 megawatt. As we mentioned earlier, we're exploring multiple megawatts in these pilot communities. So that piece seems very achievable. And 10 is not so many that even smaller communities will be able to identify, but we're certainly happy to explore 20, 30, whatever the communities can yield. And ideally, our program will continue to bloom after this initial burst of solar, and solar begets solar. So you have a handful of these installations go in, solar will start popping up elsewhere in the community. Oh, Sharon.
Hi, Leo. I just on the previous slide, the slide says Western Pennsylvania, but I think it's open to everybody across the state to apply.
Oh yeah, I apologize. Sorry,
That's all right. I put a note in the chat, but I just wanted to make a mention.
Sorry, that was just a little leftover from the previous round when we were kind of narrowing our focus, just because we're several of us are based out of Western Pennsylvania, and for the pilot program, we were doing a lot more on the ground work, so it just made a lot more sense. But now that we've we'll get into it, we've made a lot more of the resources digital and have restructured the program a bit. The whole state's available. That's a really good catch though, Sharon. Thank you. So I mentioned the Get Solar process earlier. The Get Solar communities process is a little bit different, and we're still on that back end providing that high level assessment, developing those requests for proposals, walking organizations through their solar pathway financially, helping them understand the proposal to get. But the major change is instead of us doing the outreach and all of the community building across the various geographies that our program that was open to everybody in the state provided, we're zeroing in on specific communities, and community leaders and volunteers are doing that outreach and building that network themselves. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're a leader in your community, you know what organizations have what what facilities available to them. You know the people that are amenable to solar or exploring. You know the opportunity, and you can kind of build off of that network really organically. And all you're ultimately doing is driving them to conversations with us, and ideally to that request for proposal process. So for the host site for these businesses, nonprofits, it's really great. They don't really have to do a whole lot of anything. They're approached by leaders in the community. They're educated a little bit about solar. They're encouraged to go to a webinar and then discuss opportunities with us, and then we take it from there. But we have these handy little infographic that's available as well for distribution to folks that are interested in this program, or have colleagues that might be interested from communities or leadership organizations. But it's really this simple. And you apply, we'll provide you the resources, you conduct the outreach, and we take it from there. And I'll, in the next couple slides, we'll unpack that a little bit more. So when I'm saying you, really what I mean is solar community ambassadors. These SCA groups, we call them, just volunteers from community leadership groups in the municipality. Ideally, there will be an applying organization into the Get Solar program, but that organization is mainly just sort of the vehicle to identify who these leaders are. In the previous program, we had folks that volunteered in Meadville, not really just being 2 people, who did a tremendous amount of outreach and networking, and really created a wonderful solar opportunity in their neighborhood. But we would really encourage folks to get 3 or more members to defray some of that outreach and provide a little bit of additional support. But basically, you're working with us. We'll provide the community's toolkit. I'll get to that in the next slide, or next couple slides, to provide the resources to help you identify those partners in the community, to do some outreach, do a little bit of press work, just to connect folks with the idea that this is happening, and then basically bring those folks into conversation with us through a webinar and through our other resources and other conversations about this. We would like one member to represent the applying municipality or community organization, or for that community organization to explicitly endorse the folks on those committees. So with Meadville, it was the Housing Coalition was the applying entity. With the Triborough Eco District, it was the Triborough Eco District, kind of a civic adjacent organization that's doing work, but it had support and endorsement from civic leaders in both communities. And so that really facilitated the dialogues that we needed to have in these communities pretty easily. The toolkit. So this is basically this is the meat of the work here. This is I guess the meat of the resources for folks exploring this. It's a digital packet of resources to aid in outreach. Various infographics, email templates, so raw materials that you need to build up the solar narrative in your community. And we have this in bold here, but we're going to provide a lot of technical assistance. Believe me, if this is moving in the same direction that the pilot round went into, we're looking at 50, 60 solar sites, probably at least, to package all of their data, to provide that to regional solar developers, to bring all of those proposals in, to help analyze those and distribute it back to the host sites in ways that it's understandable to them. And we had one solar developer provide us 28 proposals on 21 sites this last round. So even if they have a couple different looks at a couple different projects, some of these large stakeholders are going to have really dynamic solar opportunities that are going to require a couple different takes. And so on this piece, we're going to be doing a tremendous amount of work. So it's critical that the teams, the volunteer teams and the community leaders are self-motivated and rigorous in their use of the toolkit, and driving those conversations as much as they can until those organizations need to talk to us. Just some more examples of what that looks like: templates, emails, social media, press releases, flyers, some pre-qualification documents so that we can assess whether or not, largely just using to assess whether or not organizations have no solar pathway. If they have a enormous amounts of shade, small roof, a lot of disruption on the roof, whatever. But typically, very small projects still come through, and we still work with them to try to get a solar opportunity. So we're really just looking to get a sense of what they're working with, roof age, lifespan, those kind of things. Just a little side, community leadership really does matter for solar. It puts trust in the program. We do have a significant benefit being a nonprofit, unbiased resource in engaging with specifically schools, municipal organizations, organizations that do have some concerns about the data they're receiving or the information they're receiving from solar developers. But nothing beats friends and neighbors helping you understand or encouraging you to explore something in terms of the trust that builds. And you have the social networks, who has access to these resources or who has land available. But it also it's a really useful tool to provide community leaders. It's a useful tool for community leaders to demonstrate that they're doing work in the community and they're providing pathways for economic growth. Meadville is a climate action plan community through the DEP. So the folks that we were dealing with were exploring climate action goals. They had environmental sustainability goals that they were trying to achieve, and this was a very immediate praxis for them to start taking those goals and turning into something realistic. So for communities that are engaging in that space, this is a really great program because it's very low hanging fruit. We're going to do a lot of the work. Solar is very easy to get up relative to these sort of larger infrastructural changes that may be required down the road for us to continue these sustainable alternatives to the way that we organize ourselves now. So it provides that low-hanging fruit for community leaders to say, look, we're doing the work. We're trying to get things done here. This campaign is going to be a 12-week outreach campaign. So from that September date onward to mid-December, the core of that is just outreach. We'll have those check-ins with weekly check-ins or more with each community, to see how things are going, to workshop some ideas. And if we need to set time aside to speak with the stakeholders in the community that are interested, we can schedule all of that into those time blocks. And then we'll provide there'll be a webinar hosted in November for all businesses and tax exempt organizations to attend and learn a little bit more about the program, and then like kind of get that final push for them to send us their electric bills, their photos, and you know, get integrated into the RFP process, which we'll be releasing that RFP Friday, December 16th. So like I said, September to December, doing that work, building community interest, and then, you know, we'll gather all those resources from those host sites, working with the SCA groups, and submit these large packets of project proposal requests in January. So we'll let that holiday break happen and just start the sort of technical piece of this in January. So there's a lot of time. It seems like a lot of time to do this work, but those 12 weeks will go pretty quickly. But we're pretty confident that's a appropriate amount of time, and we'll grab all the organizations that are serious about moving forward in that space. And then afterwards, hopefully they'll be encouraged by their neighbors and their or the folks that aren't involved will be encouraged by participating organizations to explore solar. And that's already happening. I mean, we've had several organizations in both Meadville and the Triborough reach out to us after they learned through their neighboring organizations that this was happening. And we'll obviously work with those, but it's still much less painful for us to move them through in one way. So we really want to get everyone we can by December 16th. Yeah, and then by March, we'll be exploring those completed proposals from the solar developers with those host organizations. So like I said, it seems like a long timeline, but it's going to go quickly. You know, and ultimately the goal here is going solar could be simple. I mean, we're able to facilitate a very straightforward process and do a lot of the heavy lifting for organizations. I mean, really they need to apply, and they need to review proposals and decide to move forward or not. And for the community leaders and the municipal leaders on this call and in the future and want to participate in the program, you know, it's also fairly simple and straightforward for you as well. It's you know, reaching out to people in your networks who you already know are interested in these things, and maybe some folks that could benefit from it that don't have a solar literacy currently, or maybe have some misunderstandings about it, and just kind of guide them to us. We'll do the technical work, you know, along with the solar developers, and then those organizations just have to make their decisions. For the program, I mentioned some of this at the top, application requirement from the municipal organizations and community leaders. Letter of commitment, we have this outlined in our RFA, what this should look like. And it's basically just identifying key members, your background, the communities, the existing sustainable and like environmental goals and structures. And then letter of support from community groups or significant businesses, you know, any organization that has pull weight in the community or that has some solar interests. Those are really helpful to know that there's already some blooming interest in like some like you know, networking authority that that's available and can be drawn upon. And then identifying any other aspects or characteristics of your community that makes it a good fit for this kind of program. All of that needs to be submitted no later than 5 o'clock on Friday, September 2nd. Again, it seems like it's far away, but it's not. So folks that are interested, please reach out to me whenever you can to talk a little bit more about it. If you have questions or other thoughts, you know, walk through. You know, in the event we get more than 5 communities, we obviously want to narrow that down. Organizations or communities that are interested and apply and don't get selected, we'll try to you know, move them towards the next the next program if they are a viable community that just didn't score as highly as, you know, the top 5. We'll try to sort of build up their solar narrative so that they can get into the next round. But, you know, 5 communities is really where we want to sit, and we're going to rate them on, you know, leadership, commitment, existing commitment to renewable energy efficiency programs, just commitment to large scale or meaningfully large community developments in this general space. And then we want to explore communities that are diverse, that have economic diversity, demographic diversity, environmental justice communities, and enterprise zones will get special consideration. It's part of our goal set, as we mentioned at the top. We want every Pennsylvanian to enjoy a share in the clean energy future, and obviously sometimes environmental considerations, economic considerations and these kind of develops don't always reach every community, don't impact communities proportionally. So we want to try to make sure that we're a leveling force in that space. All right, and just a reminder here, the important dates, that Friday, September 2nd, that's the most significant thing to have on your mind right now. Early September, we'll work to get folks up to speed to develop a strategy for reaching out to organizations and community. We'll host that webinar on Monday, November 14th, the week of Monday, November 14th. It'll be probably middle of the week during work hours for folks to participate. We'll consider, depending on response and other things, we might extend that to 2 or 3 webinars if we have like a really high volume of interest, and it'll be difficult to schedule everybody on one day. And then the applications are due by those hosts or potential host sites for solar Friday, December 16th. So that's it for the presentation. I appreciate everybody patiently waiting for your opportunity to talk a little bit more. So I'll open it up to questions. It'd be ideal, I guess, if folks maybe raise your hand, but if folks have questions, let's get into it.
Hey, Leo, while people are putting their questions in the chat or either thinking about what they are, I just wanted to mention too that we're working with Generation 180 in the Solar for All Schools program. Next Friday, we'll have a webinar about that. So if your community wants to also include your schools in this, that's a great opportunity. They have resources, and then we'll also be offering the technical assistance through the Get Solar program, and that can all be a part of this as well.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, and we'll obviously be integrating a lot of the work that we do into the webinar series and the various other components of outreach. So we try to make that multi-tiered impact, and communities that have legislators that could be solar champions or maybe are a little adverse to solar right now. Like those are great conversations that we can build into this process as well. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Yeah, and just a reminder, if you joined late, you might not have heard. We've recorded this webinar. We'll provide that to folks. We'll provide all the resources, the RFA, and any other the infographics, some other resources for you to distribute to your colleagues or other folks that are interested in your communities. Any questions? Okay. Well, like I said, I'm happy to speak with anybody. Just reach out to me via email, or you can give me a call too. I would love to talk more about this with folks and explore some ideas. It's a really exciting opportunity right now for solar, and we really want to see what kind of impact this can have ongoing. I think we're going to have some really exciting stuff shake out of the 2 communities we work with already, but there's a lot of opportunities. There's way more ground to cover than we have in probably in a lifetime. So we're excited to hit the ground running. Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate all of your time, and hope you have a lovely week and weekend.